Welcome to Silicon Slopes Live. It's the first one of 2021, and we're joined by Steve Lindsley, who's the president of Grōv Technologies. How are you?
Good to see you, Garrett. Nice to be here, man. This is my first time here. This is an impressive place you got here.
Thank you very much. We're going to play ping pong for $20 after, according to you. Yeah, I appreciate you taking the time to be here. This is one that I'm quite excited about, ag tech, and I got some good farming questions and cow questions. But let's start off with explaining to our listeners and our audience what Grōv Technologies is.
Yeah, okay, cool. Happy to do it. Grōv Technologies is really the operating system and the machine that is part of the vertical farming business. And Grōv Technologies is a 100% subsidiary, wholly owned by Nu Skin in Provo, and we compete, if you will, in what's called the controlled environment agriculture space. And so just taking a step back on sort of what we call CEA, controlled ag, there's been several $100 million invested in the last few years on controlled environment. And the thesis really is that in a growing environment, not only obviously in North America, but around the world, the biggest challenge is really the weather. And then when you add sort of climate change or challenges with the weather in that respect, then our ability to feed the population, our ability, the United Nations says we're going to add 2.5 billion people to the earth in the next 30 years, and we're going to have to feed them with less arable land and less water. So the controlled environment agriculture movement, if you will, and the investment is to take the production indoors, you eliminate the weather, and then you take the fusion of robotics, of ML, of IoT infrastructures and platforms. We can talk more specifically as we get going, but you take the best of the technology, you move it indoors, and now you've got a chance to have a predictable, optimized crop every time. So Grōv is a part of that umbrella movement, if you will. Rich Wood is the CEO of Nu Skin and really has a passion for this space. What makes us unique is the others in the space, and some of your viewers may be familiar with Plenty or AeroFarms or Bowery. Jeff Bezos is into Plenty and Google is into Bowery. What they're focused on is produce and vegetables for human consumption, where Grōv is mostly focused is on animal feed and the worldwide business of feeding our animals out there, and to do it with controlled environment. So that's Grōv Tech.
Yeah, and obviously when people are watching this, they can go to the website and see the cool machine, and it's not horizontal, it goes up, right? And better utilization of space, and some really amazing numbers there, right? The time from seed to when it can be in the cow's mouth, 7 days, roughly a week. And then talk a little bit about the machine and the seed mixture and ultimately the health product for the cows.
Yeah. Part of the real benefit of controlled environment, and those of you that will go to our website, you'll be able to see this. It's GrōvTech, TECH.com. But part of the cool thing about the technology is that you can take a space literally about 875 feet, square feet on the ground. You go up about 24 feet, and you can grow the equivalent of between 30 and 50 acres of crop in that space. So, I mean, there's not 875 square feet right here. So you could put, at least on the ground, you could fit several of our machines in the space, assuming you could go vertical, and you would be replacing hundreds of acres of land. And that's really the key challenges around the world are we're using way too much land around the world in agriculture and growing, and we're using way too much water. And so within that space, that 30 to 50 acres will only use about 5% of the water with no pesticides and no herbicides. So yeah, if you go to the website, you'll see it. I wish we had the ability to show it to you in the interview here, but you can go to the website and look at it. It's very cool. It's all automated. Stripping labor out of the equation for farmers is really key. I mean, you take a look at the labor environment right now in the United States, and it's really hard to find people that want to work on a dairy farm, let alone work on, a feed system or whatnot. So stripping the labor out of the equation is totally key. Our technology is patented from the operating system to the lighting technique. And it's really, when Nu Skin invested in the technology about 4 years ago, Rich Wood, the CEO, he looked at some of the products that were grown with the lights, and he was saying, this would be very cool to be able to grow products for Nu Skin ingredients that they distribute around the world. And then as a dairy farmer from Weiser, Idaho, he was saying, this is cool for human consumption, but animals would love this. And literally his passion and being raised on a dairy farm, his passion for animals and farming led to some early work to feed animals with the product. And now tens of millions of dollars of investment later, and we've got our first install out at the Bateman Dairy, Utah's largest dairy. Now we're feeding animals. We actually have a business. We're talking with people literally around the world about this. It's pretty exciting and pretty cool.
Yeah, it's very impactful. On the family farm in Wilsonville, Nebraska, I've spent a lot of time with cows, and a lot of farmers will do cows, not that they're passionate about it, it's just like, okay, that's one more revenue stream, but it is a pain, right? Because, you put a calf and a mom cow out to pasture, and it takes 10 acres for them to grow and be fed, and then eventually, the grass will burn out, and you've got to take them to the corn stalks, and so that's dangerous, and that's when the cows get hurt or people get hurt. Plus, it's way time consuming. So with this, imagine the efficiencies of a farm where you can keep them in a feedlot, and then you could put your other fields to corn or soybeans or wheat or whatever is the best there. So I assume there's a lot of farmers that would love it just from the time savings, and it would obviously increase their revenue. And I remember on the farm there with my grandpa and great uncle pulling water out of a well, and for those guys, that's like gold, right? Like, they respect water more than anything, and they worry about it constantly, and they're always that's what keeps them up at night. Is it going to rain? If it's not, where's this water going to come from? So as you're interacting, your customers are farmers, and perhaps the perception is that they're unsophisticated, old McDonald, but the reality is different. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, absolutely. And I notice you've got your John Deere hat on, so it's very important for the discussion. First of all, picking a partner to launch this product with is key, obviously, and we've been very fortunate in that the Bateman family across Utah Lake. A lot of people, on the east side of Utah Lake where we all live, a lot of people have never been on the west side of Utah Lake and seen what's out there. But in a little town called Mosita, you have Utah's largest dairy. And these guys have tens of thousands of animals on their property. They milk 7,500 animals 3 times a day. They'll produce over 600,000 pounds of milk a day. So it's pretty cool to see these big dairy farmers of America, tractor trailers pull up and haul their milk out of there. But the Batemans have been innovators for many years. They've won awards. They've done some amazing things. But what we've learned in our interaction with the Batemans, and then now with farmers literally around the world, from folks in New Zealand to North Africa to the Chinese to the Canadians, and then of course in the United States, is the dairy industry is a legacy industry that is looking to consolidate, looking to get smarter, and they have adopted for years now the best technology in the world. I mean, John Deere is a good example of some of the best GPS-driven machines on the planet. The Batemans are no different. They're from how they grow their own crops to how they take care of their animals and their animal welfare strategies. They could see, and most farmers, again, it really comes down to control. And I guess it's really no different than any sort of business vertical out there, is that you want to be able to minimize your risk. And the farmers have always had weather and the challenges with their crop, whether they're growing it on their own or whether they're sourcing it from folks literally around the world or on commodity markets or whatever. The farmers are really at the mercy of the weather and the changes in the weather. And you take a look, even this year, this last summer, out of the blue in Iowa, I can't remember, there's a name for the storm, but there was a massive storm that came in and wiped out 10 million acres of corn. And if you're on a heavy corn silage diet, then you're now thrown into chaos if you're really, you're focused there. So large operators and even smaller farmers around the world, they're looking for ways for technology to reduce their risk and to help them drive a greater, optimized, profitable future, not only for the farmers today, but it's interesting. You were raised on a farm, and you made the decision to come be a high-tech leader here in Utah. And a lot of these guys are looking for ways to keep their families on the farm, and it's a challenge. When the younger generation sees the new technology, including our technology, it really fires them up to say, you know what? Now this is how we can generate a profitable future for our families for years to come. And that's been a really cool experience. I'm not a farmer. I was a media and telecom guy. I was president of the KSL TV group for a number of years, and then I was at Comcast, and then before I came here, I was running the charter media teams in Los Angeles. I had a really cool job. I ran 10 Western states. I had part of my teams ran the Lakers and the Los Angeles Dodgers media team, so I had a lot of fun. And we were always, looking to drive next generation technology. Years ago, I was chairman and CEO of a tech co called USDTV, which was really the forerunner to what Sling TV is today. And so when I got a call from Rich Wood at Nu Skin, he said, look, I've got some really cool technology. I need someone to help me take it to market. What I could see, I didn't know the dairy business or the beef business. I know enough now to kind of be dangerous, if you will. But what I absolutely could see is that technology now, the fusion of great technologies, and a lot of great technology companies here in Utah, the fusion of great technology is now making it possible for controlled environment to be profitable. And that's when the game changes. You've had greenhouse growing for years and years. So the idea of moving indoors isn't new. But now when you're bringing robotics in, and you're bringing machine learning, and you're bringing the cloud, and again, we just announced a major deal with Amazon Web Services, and I was on their reInvent conference a couple of weeks ago. They're fired up, man. I mean, the guys that touch this thing, they say, wow, great for North America, but think about how nations around the world, you take Singapore for an example. Singapore has 600 acres to feed what is close to 6 to 7 million people. The Batemans on their own farm on 4,000 acres. So one good size, then they're not, you've got other guys that have tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of acres, obviously. So you've got countries and nations around the world that are literally importing 100%, 90% of all of their food. So again, the thesis with indoor is you can do it profitably indoors. Now, if you can take these farms and put them next to consumption, because part of the challenge with agriculture, in addition to the weather, is you think about how we transport our food. If you're in Chicago having a salad, on average, that produce has had to travel 1,500, maybe 2,000 miles. You think of the GHG impact of throwing those emissions into the air, and then how much do we waste? You know, we could spend a lot of time talking about the waste associated with travel. So again, the thesis is take an AeroFarm system or a Plenty system or a Grōv Tech system and put it next to the consumption, cut out all of the transportation, cut out the GHG, use sustainable energy sources to power it. It's a really cool technology, and the good news is the time has come for it. The market's embracing it.
It's very exciting, and it's going to be wildly impactful. Talk a little bit real quick, if you could, about what the actual feed is. You know, because cows will eat corn and silage and alfalfa, but a lot of the times the field next to it might have been sprayed for pesticides, and a lot of times you don't know what your cows are eating. So what is your kind of food stock there, and what do the cows ultimately eat?
Yeah. So just real quick, for those who aren't necessarily familiar with it, in a dairy environment, the animals will be fed what they call a total mixed ration. And you remember sort of what that looks like. But you get a combination of forages, which can be your hays and alfalfas and haylage and corn silage and those kinds of things. So you have your forages, and then you have your vitamins and your minerals, and they call them their concentrates. They blend that together, and then they feed the animals, you know, in this case with the Batemans 3 times a day. So they feed them 2 or 3 times a day. It's fascinating what we're able to grow in a Grōv tower, we call it. And you're right, it takes between 5 and 7 days. By the time you plant the seed in the trays, and then you move it through the system, you hit it at the right time with the right watering technology and the right lighting technology, and within 5 to 7 days, you have, I would say, 6 to 8 inches now of what could be a replacement for forages if it's an alfalfa or it's a corn silage. But the nutritional value and the digestibility of this crop also allows you to potentially replace some of the concentrates and the minerals. So with the Batemans, the early tests, we fed the animals 12.5% of that total ration was the Grōv feed, if you will. We think we can do 20, 30, and even higher. There's some people around the world, as you know, that only feed grass to their animals year-round. That's all they eat, so it's totally grass-fed. Our belief is it probably stops within, say, 50% of the ration. But the key is half of the total expense on a dairy is feed. So if you can control it, and you can get an optimized, predictable grow every time, that's the power now. And then how much of it you replace with corn silage or alfalfa or the minerals, really going to come down to the nutritionists. These guys have, you know, like the Batemans, they have PhD level nutritionists who study this thing all day long, every day. They see the quality of the milk. They make adjustments. It's very scientific. It's very science-based. It's really fun to be a part of it. But we plan to replace a healthy part of both the forages and the concentrate.
Very cool. Yeah, as entrepreneurs go, farmers are pretty versatile. They're accountants, and they're scientists, and, you know, they're workers. And so, you know, for a farmer debating what to do next year, he's debating what equipment to buy, and he's debating where to plant and what to plant. So if you buy a new combine, they get pretty pricey, and you do the math, like, all right, how long will it take to get the ROI in this? So you guys are a company that wants to sell these to farmers. You get the yes. What's the onboarding process? You know, eventually you're going to go out to the farm and put in the tower. What's that like?
Yeah, okay. Yeah, great question. I mean, right now we've been testing. We've done extensive tests both for dairy animals and for beef animals. And you know, the beef side of the business is really interesting for a couple of reasons. Number one is traditional beef is being hammered by sort of the lab-based or the fake, I would call it sort of the fake meat people. And so there's a heavy sort of counterpunch that we think is really nice, that when you feed the animals a fresh green grass, then you don't necessarily have a grass-fed meat, but you have a Grōv-fed meat, which is more sustainable, uses less land, uses less water, no pesticides. So sort of why you would purchase organic meat is why you would purchase a Grōv-fed meat. How we approach the farmers in terms of the business side is, early on, as a young company, we're looking and we're talking to about a dozen folks right now. There are 7 areas in the world that we've really focused on where we want to launch initially. Ideally down the road, the farmer will purchase, like he would a combine, he'll purchase the machines, and then there'll be reoccurring revenues through license fees that we charge for our software and services. In the early days, we're sitting down and we're doing deals to partner with folks to be able to make sense on their farm, so that whatever the replacement is, the cost there, we want it to be similar to what their current cost is, so it's not hard for them to make the decision. And then as we get better at our overall yields, and as we get smarter on cutting costs out of the equation, then our hope, Garrett, in our business plan in a very short period of time is to have our pricing model be very close to whatever they're replacing it with. So it's an easy decision. The ROI is in the 3 to 5 year range, depending on that's what we're getting to, is something that can be very competitive. And as we get into scale, as we do more deals, then we'll be in a negotiating opportunity to be able to get better supply chain situations and whatever. But the key is we get multiple data sets from multiple installations so that we can share the benefits of the animals eating this fresh wheatgrass in this case are really pretty amazing. The early statistics with the abatements and the metrics are showing that the animals are actually eating a total mixed ration less dry matter pounds, if you will, but they're producing about the same or even a little bit more. That's where the magic kicks in, is that if they ultimately are paying less for their feed, but getting the same output, and the health of the animals improving, now we're building a story that can really resonate really around the world.
Yeah, absolutely. And it'll probably free up time for some of the hired hands or some of the, the farmers that have generational families to focus on other things, right? The math is fairly simple once you can validate the return on investment there. Yeah. So what's kind of your vision for, forecasting out the future of the American farm, and what is your guys' role going to be in that?
Okay. That's a great question. I mean, the United States is a net exporter of feed. We're fortunate to live in an environment where the feed prices are the lowest here. So we know that as we do deals with farmers in North America, we know that we'll do deals internationally, because this is the toughest climate. You go where people are importing, that's where our profit margins are the best, and that's where the business can really scale there. In terms of our hope for our relationships in the United States, I mean, one of the things that's really interesting on a consumer standpoint, especially with, I would say, a millennial group, is they're very interested as to where their food comes from. They're very interested in the traceability side of this. So we go to the extent of building an operating system and a rather complex machine, and add the best technology in the world, in part because we want to be able to tell the story that's traceable, that says, well, that milk came from that cow that was fed this diet, and it's cleaner and purer and more healthy for the animal. I mean, that's our ultimate goal, is to be able to build traceability. We think that's going to be a strong message for both dairy and beef providers who want to tell that sustainable story. They want to tell they already are telling an animal welfare story, but we think we can enhance that with what we're doing there. We have a really cool relationship with the organization that runs the message. If you're familiar with the Got Milk campaign, the people that come up with that out of Chicago, the Dairy Management Inc. folks, they're really interested in studying this autonomous feed, and they've got us as a part of their 2050 initiative of, how can you take a fresh, clean, predictable feed and optimize production and animal welfare for the long haul while being smarter for the planet. And so we've got a great relationship with those folks. I expect that will continue. The international side is a real priority. And it's interesting, we talk about Nu Skin and Nu Skin's involvement. One of the things that I didn't know about Nu Skin is they have this amazing program. They call it the Nourish the Children program, where every day they feed, I want to say over 100,000 kids this meal they give them. The kids have to come to school in order to get the meal. It's a crazy number, but they fed over 700 million meals. I had no idea. I mean, I know Nu Skin for years, a BYU guy, and I've known, the founders and as I said, Rich Wood and whatnot. I had no idea how involved these guys are. So the idea of investing in technology to help feed the world is actually sort of part of their DNA. Yeah. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, absolutely. So you've got software and you've got hardware, you've got the Internet of Things, and then you've got the building of the tower. You need a pretty diverse group of folks to help do this. So as you're building your team, what's the talent that you need, and how are you ultimately building your team and scaling it?
Yeah. It's a good question. I joined Grōv in April of 2018, and fortunate to be there in the early days. The founders were really really innovators, technologists, if you will. The lighting, our CTO is really a lighting expert. His understanding of the LED market and how to manipulate the spectrum and be able to do it in a way that accelerates growth or even accelerates the nutrition on the plant. It's pretty wild where not only are we growing, but we're actually improving the nutritional quality of the grow because of the lighting that we do. It's pretty cool stuff. So they were, great entrepreneurs, still are, they're still with us. But the first key move that I made was I hired Paul Whitlock out of Intel. He's a local guy out of American Fork who's with Intel and manufacturing lean supply chain for 23 years. And he, our VP of Ops, he's been really the guy that's been most instrumental in pulling together, building our prototype machines, yes, but getting ready to scale. That's the key. So who do we need? We've been hiring some really great engineering talent, folks that come from a broad and diverse engineer background, mechanical, electrical, and so forth. Our software engineers are really good, really smart guys. We blended their efforts with the AWS teams and built really the first platform, if you will. It's not just a growing machine. It's really a cloud-based platform that manages the data. At the end of the day, the machine is a mechanism to, get the feed, but it's the data, Garrett, that we're able to retrieve every day, and the data that we're able to share, the protocols that we're able to share really with our customers around the world. That may be the value of the company that is the most important, is really the data. So the data engineer side, software side, our mechanical groups, they've been the key on the product side. And then, we've hired some really smart guys on the biz dev side. And as we get going, I anticipate having, most of the, the startups out there, you kind of scale it. And we're to the point now as we get our initial deals complete, there'll be a time we'll jump here and we'll have a fully robust biz dev team that will be far bigger than what we've got today, because we'll be calling on the Chinese, on the Abu Dhabi group, the North Africa group, South America, so we'll need all that.
Yeah, you got your work cut out for you. It'll be an exciting 10 years.
Yeah.
A couple more questions and we'll wrap up. So, what do you think of the BYU football season?
I was so happy with how BYU football turned out this year. I mean, first of all, you got to give Tom Holmoe credit for pulling off that schedule, because the whole thing evaporated on him at the beginning of the year. Yeah, I had the pleasure of playing for Lavelle in the 80s, and I played quarterback there 100 years ago. I was a pretty good quarterback. The problem was I followed, Gifford Nielsen and Jim McMahon, Steve Young, Robbie Bosco. So
yeah, that's pretty good.
If those guys don't play, I would be one of the better quarterbacks there. But no, it was great. Lavelle was fantastic, and looking at what Kalani has done, it's really impressive. I mean, that independent play, that's not easy. And I give those guys a lot of credit for what they're doing. Zach, their quarterback, he's the real deal. I mean, this kid, knock on wood, I think he's got a bright future. He's got a very strong arm. He is, good size. His feet, his ability to put himself in position to throw is as good as anybody in the country. And you know what? He's committed. Because the ability to read the defense and to be able to make adjustments on the fly is everything, and I think he's legit. So it's been fun to watch him.
Yeah, it was a fun year, and kudos to them for stepping up to the plate and going forward with all that stuff. Kind of last question, and you can put a positive spin on it, even though it's a fun negative question. It's a complex system and a complex machine that you're building, and complex markets and all of that. What have been one or two things where it was just you and your team were way off, and then how did you adjust to those corrections?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that is an excellent question, and now that especially with the there's the normal process of a startup, and then there's a startup with COVID on top of you. And I give our team just, so much credit for hanging in there and figuring out ways to continue to make progress. It's kind of weird. In some areas of our business, I feel like we're actually more productive. Do you know what I'm saying? Because we're dialed in more, I think. But I would say, especially if you're in development, that what I missed. And what I could have done better on is setting a better expectation in terms of how long it would take to actually come to market. Even after you get a prototype built, we're enthusiastic. I'm kind of a sales guy at heart. I get excited about the marketing side of this. I mean, I could go all day on the benefits as to why CEA makes sense for the world and all that. So you kind of want it to come out fast. I think having the courage to be able to give yourself more space a little bit in terms of if you're setting an expectation with an investor, or in my case with New Skin or whatever, I would set the table and give our team, give our management and our engineers a little more time to come to market with a scalable play. That's, I think, the key. That's the difference, is you can get good design work, you can get prototype work, but actually having, in our case, the technology ready to go for prime time, it takes time. And so setting the expectations, that doesn't mean you don't go, obviously, as hard as you can. You do. You go as hard as you can. But if you set that expectations, I know it would have been it would have helped us overall, and I think for folks that are watching, I think having I would say the courage to be able to look at your product roadmap, to look at what you're building, and think about giving your teams a little more space to achieve, so they get that win instead of, well, we missed a deadline. Because these guys are working, guys and gals, working night and day on this thing, and we want them to succeed. We want them to know they're doing great work. And so setting the right expectations, I think, helps that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Great answer. Well, I've enjoyed every minute of this. Thank you so much, Steve, and look forward to your guys' continued success, and I look forward to getting a tour out there one day soon.
Come anytime, man.
Cool. Thank you.